Super Lucky Disaster Man. Chapter 36. The thickest admirer's lens appeared. A completely ordinary rooftop, now turned peculiar due to the presence of 3 undercover agents, a cat, and an innocent passerby. As an FBI agent undercover in the black organization, Akai Shuichi looked at the other 3 people, who all seemed to recognize one another, and inexplicably felt isolated. Strange, he was supposed to be here to rescue the undercover agent from the Japanese police, the one feeling helpless should be Scotch. So why had it turned into this instead? Akai Shuichi subtly observed Bourbon, who was following after him, then inferred Bourbon's attitude based on Scotch's expressions, confirming that this person was likely on the same side as Scotch. As for the boy who suddenly appeared, if he had been before they came, then it was probably a coincidence. Bourbon also seemed genuinely shocked, indicating that the boy wasn't supposed to be there, and had no connection to the organization. Well, that made things easier. I am an FBI investigative officer. Akai Shuichi was faced with 2 guns pointed at him, and he decisively chose to reveal his identity. Otherwise, he feared that he might be dealt with by the person he attempted to rescue and his accomplice. Such a scenario would indeed be the greatest joke, an injustice that would make him die with regrets. I'm here to save Scotch. My partner is already nearby, ready to stage his death at any moment. Amuro Toru remained vigilant without lowering his gun, maintaining his loyal member persona to the liquor factory. So you're a traitor too? Akai Shuichi. Stop with the script, and perhaps more sincerity. Komaeda Nagito's gaze swept across the entire scene, from one person to another, feeling that everyone seemed to shine with brilliance talents, FBI, and undercover. Amuro-san must be a police officer, right? He's really too lucky. The wounds on his face didn't seem to hurt anymore. Although I'm not really sure what's going on. Komaeda Nagito chuckled as he chimed in, but now isn't the time to waste time, you gentlemen should be quite clear on this point, right? The 3 gentlemen fell silent. He does have a point. But why does it sound inexplicably annoying? Komaeda Nagito broke the tense atmosphere, and after that, everything went much more smoothly. They quickly began discussing how to deceive the organization with relevant information, while Komaeda Nagito stayed in the background, continuing to chase after the stray cat. Amuro-san. It's coming your way. Amuro Toru sighed as he turned around, blocking the exit to the rooftop. He bent down and scooped the cat up into his arms with one hand. There. He used his expert cat-soothing techniques to calm down the overly energetic cat, then handed the now peaceful cat over to Komaeda Nagito. Feeling like the atmosphere didn't seem quite right. Why were the 3 undercover agents discussing how to fake a death on site, and why was there a teenager chasing a cat? Ah, tough work. Komaeda Nagito, with scratch marks on his face, smiled brightly and said, as much as I'd love to stay, the elderly landlord must be getting worried by now. Since the cat's been found, I'll head downstairs first. Komaeda-kun, leave the building after 5 minutes, and don't tell anyone about what happened here. Amuro Toru couldn't just let someone who witnessed everything leave like that, even if it was someone whose background had been thoroughly investigated. If it wasn't for knowing that there were still people waiting for Komaeda Nagito along with the cat, and that if he didn't return soon they'd come looking for him, in fact, he would rather take Komaeda Nagito away right now, ensure his safety, and then release him, or directly put him on protective custody. Komaeda Nagito pondered, 5 minutes. I get it. Basically, it wasn't time for unnecessary conversation, the implication was to hurry up and go down, right? Receiving his mission, Komaeda Nagito swiftly ran down the stairs. Going down was much easier than going up, so it only took him a minute. He arrived at the place where the door was still ajar, knocked directly, and entered. Amid the landlord's surprised expression, Komaeda Nagito handed the cat back to him. The landlord felt truly embarrassed as he looked at Komaeda Nagito's injured face. This injury. I'm really sorry. Should I apply some medicine for you? Sorry, just now my classmate called saying they were coming to my house to find me, so I can't keep them waiting. I have to leave now, Komaeda Nagito made up an excuse casually. Where's the contract? Let's just sign it now. The landlord was surprised, leaving in such a hurry. Fine, take the contract home and look it over carefully. Someone else will be here in a moment to repair the lock, and things are a bit chaotic here. Let's schedule another time. Good, thank you. Komaeda Nagito cheerfully agreed, rolled up the contract, stuffed it into his bag, and then immediately dashed downstairs at full speed. As he neared the first floor, his phone suddenly rang. Komaeda-kun. Amuro Toru spoke on the other end of the call. Right now, act as normal, go to the convenience store across the street, buy a bottle of drink, take your time picking it out, and keep an eye on your phone for any messages. Komaeda Nagito didn't ask when Amuro Toru had gotten his phone number. After all, just like Dazai-kun, it was probably through some illegal means, so he readily agreed, all right. He was helping Hope. For such a person like him, who should have nothing to do with lifelong espionage battles like the FBI, somehow had the chance to help an undercover agent escape, it was simply too lucky. Truly startled by the unexpected favor, Komaeda Nagito obediently walked towards the convenience store as instructed and after that, stood for a while in front of the beverage section, studying it for quite some time. He received a message, went to pay, and stepped outside to hail a cab. After following the instructions, a taxi pulled up in front of the convenience store. Komaeda Nagito immediately got in the car, noticing that the driver was someone unfamiliar, but the person in the back seat, wearing a hat that covered most of his face, was none other than the young man known as Scotch. Morofushi Hiromitsu looked somewhat serious, as if he was pondering over some difficult issue, but upon seeing Komaeda Nagito enter the car, he still gave him a gentle smile. Don't worry, Morofushi Hiromitsu said. The driver is one of us, and the taxi is just a disguise. The other two are responsible for cleanup, while we just need to ensure our movements aren't exposed. There's no surveillance in this area. So he was able to escape in this direction, since directly running into the surveillance was essentially courting death. Although he wasn't part of the intelligence division within the Black organization, as an undercover agent, he had received a lot of relevant training. It could be said that any place he had ever been to, the locations of surveillance points were etched in his memory. This habit helped him eliminate traces and suspicious points at this moment, making it easier to fabricate the scene along with his childhood friend and that FBI. Komaeda Nagito asked obediently, "Where are you taking me?" On this topic, Morofushi Hiromitsu's expression turned a bit awkward. We're currently heading to Yokohama, to your place. Before, Amuro Toru was tasked with investigating the port mafia on behalf of the Black organization, confirming the existence of powerful ability users. Moreover, due to Dazai Osamu's warning, delivered in person as an executive candidate, the Black organization had decided to temporarily halt business operations on the Yokohama side, which indeed was a significant favor to them. The Black organization wouldn't easily believe the body of Scotch, presented by Akai Shuichi and Amuro Toru. They were bound to investigate what had happened before and after the incident thoroughly. In terms of constructing a consistent narrative, those two were quite proficient. However, the Black organization would certainly send someone to secretly investigate if anyone unusual had been in the vicinity, in a place they normally shouldn't be. Komaeda Nagito came to check out the apartment, leaving before Scotch's time of death. Later, due to the lack of nearby buses and the Shinkansen being a bit far away, he just took a taxi home. After all, even if they trusted that Komaeda Nagito wouldn't casually reveal anything, according to procedure, surveillance was still necessary. Otherwise, it would be hard to write the report, and if those higher-ups found out later, it would only create more trouble for Komaeda Nagito. It's better to just follow the procedure now, and then submit a report saying there's no need to worry, those above wouldn't have any other reaction. At times like this, Komaeda Nagito's not-so-poor family background was a huge help. If it were an ordinary junior high school student from a normal family, taking a taxi all the way from Tokyo to Yokohama would definitely be suspicious behavior. No matter what, from the perspective of the black organization, Komaeda Nagito's suspicions could essentially be dismissed, and the convenience store's surveillance footage could help him clear his name. Especially with that innocent-looking face and fresh cat scratch marks, it looked so pitifully innocent that it was almost deadly. Anyone with even a bit of trained combat skills wouldn't be scratched up like that by a cat. Even someone as paranoid as Jin, upon watching the surveillance footage, would only be left speechless seeing Komaeda Nagito in that state. However, even if it was done with good intentions, directly sending someone home with this sort of implicit threat really couldn't be justified. Morofushi Hiromitsu spoke apologetically, "I'm sorry for causing you trouble, but you can't refuse." "No problem. I didn't intend to refuse in the first place," Komaeda Nagito said with a kind of joy that Morofushi Hiromitsu couldn't understand. "If there's anything else you need my cooperation with, please feel free to ask. It's my honor to help you all." Today, chasing after the cat onto the rooftop was really such good luck. No, if you encounter something like this in the future, it's best to run away as far as possible. Morofushi Hiromitsu, in an educational tone aimed at a child's sense of adventure and excitement, said seriously, "You really shouldn't have stuck your head out just now. It would have been better to keep hiding there." "No, it feels like that wouldn't have worked either. If that FBI agent was actually a bad guy, he'd definitely check the area after leaving. In that case, he would still discover you, so indeed, it would be better to run quickly when his back is turned." As he spoke, Morofushi Hiromitsu sighed. It was precisely because he considered Akai Shuichi at that time to be a bad person capable of any evil that he temporarily gave up on immediately taking his own life out of concern for Komaeda Nagito. Although based on the education he had received so far, in truth, he should have decisively destroyed his phone and committed suicide at that moment, to prevent intel from falling into enemy hands. As for involving innocent civilians, that was just an unavoidable sacrifice. After all, to save one person at the cost of intel leaking could possibly end up killing even more people. But even if he had always performed well in his studies, to abandon an innocent child like that, he found himself still hesitating. Luckily, right afterward, Akai Shuichi revealed himself as an FBI agent, and his childhood friend arrived in time, sparing him from further inner turmoil. Otherwise, although he was willing to sacrifice himself for his country, if he caused the death of an innocent child due to a poor choice of escape route, even in death, he would be filled with regret and unable to find peace. In short, don't put yourself in danger. Always prioritize protecting your own life. Leave dangerous matters to us adults. Morofushi Hiromitsu concluded, then asked, "You should quickly treat the injuries on your face. Shall I help?" Komaeda Nagito hurriedly replied, "I can do it myself." "You can't see where the wounds are. Let me do it." Morofushi Hiromitsu bent down, pulled out a hidden compartment, took out a small box, and opened it to reveal a first aid kit. He picked a vial of medicine and grabbed a pack of cotton swabs, planning to treat Komaeda Nagito's wounds in the car. Morofushi Hiromitsu's reasoning made sense. Komaeda Nagito wasn't someone particularly difficult, so he obediently closed his eyes, lifted his head, and waited for Morofushi Hiromitsu to apply the medicine. "Alright, when we get back, let's get a vaccine shot just in case," Morofushi Hiromitsu sighed in relief, then frowned again, taking out his phone to check it, seemingly waiting for some news. The incident hadn't settled yet. Whether they managed to deceive the black organization or not would depend on the situation over the next 2 days. After checking his phone and confirming that there wasn't anything wrong on his end, Morofushi Hiromitsu looked up at Komaeda Nagito and said, "Alright, next up is about your situation." Komaeda Nagito sat up a bit straighter. "Please continue." Before he could finish his words, his phone suddenly rang. Komaeda Nagito glanced at the caller ID, feeling somewhat puzzled. This person rarely had time off, and usually didn't actively contact him. Why would they be calling him now? Morofushi Hiromitsu gestured for him to go ahead and answer, and Komaeda Nagito picked up the call. "Inspector Hagiwara?" Upon hearing this very familiar surname, Morofushi Hiromitsu's gaze underwent a subtle shift. No, the Hagiwara surname wasn't exactly rare. But if you were talking about a police officer with the name Hagiwara Komai Dakuin, Hagiwara Kenji, who could be considered half a mentor to Komai Nagito, asked over the phone, "Are you still at XXXX Street?" Komai Nagito, hearing his previous address mentioned, suddenly remembered. Because the landlord had rushed him to move out too abruptly, and he hadn't found a stable place to stay yet, he hadn't told Hagiwara Kenji and Masuda Jinpei about it. After all, although he had always kept them informed about his address, they had never actually visited his home. They probably just wanted to confirm through information that nothing had happened to his place, so notifying them of the address change didn't seem that urgent. "No, I've already moved out. The landlord wanted to sell the property and pushed me to move out rather quickly." "Is that so?" Hagiwara Kenji sighed in relief on the other end of the phone. "Jinpei and I happened to have today off, and while we were passing by your area, we felt the atmosphere wasn't quite right. We were worried that you might have gotten yourself into some trouble again." Rather than saying it wasn't aligned with their intuition, it would be more accurate to say it was dangerous. Only those who had undergone training could feel that kind of discomfort, the sensation of being watched from all directions. Considering Komai Nagito's misfortune's constitution, the two of them immediately left that strange area on the spot and found a small alley to call Komai Nagito, just to make sure nothing had happened to this unlucky kid once again. Actually, that matter over there has nothing to do with me." Komai Nagito, restricted by the confidentiality agreement, couldn't directly talk about Ayatsuji Yukito's situation and could only vaguely say, "I've already moved away, which means they don't care about me." The rest is the content of the confidentiality agreement. Mentioning the confidentiality agreement, the two police officers on the other side of the phone immediately understood. This unlucky kid really got dragged into troublesome matters again. "Well, as long as he's alright, that's good." With mixed feelings, Hagiwara Kenji gave a few advices before hanging up the phone. Probably that detective neighbor of his, Masuda Jinpei, who had been listening silently, suddenly spoke. Even Komai moved away, there's no reason for that detective agency to still be running. "I think so too," Hagiwara Kenji tossed his phone. "If he's just a neighbor, then it has nothing to do with us. Let's go. The store we're looking for should not be far from here." Continuing this pursuit recklessly would get them dragged in for questioning as well. It's better to avoid unnecessary trouble. Masuda Jinpei nodded in agreement. Compared to the two police academy classmates who quickly settles their worries, Morofushi Hiromitsu, who was besides Komai Nagito, couldn't just walk away as easily. Since he's a spy, eavesdropping is an essential skill, and his ability to catch even the tiniest of sounds has to be very high. When adjusting firearms, even the slightest abnormal noise needs to be detected, or else it could lead to major incidents. With such exceptional hearing, Morofushi Hiromitsu was very certain that the voice on the other end of the phone was indeed Hagiwara Kenji, someone he knew well, who was also a mutual friend of his and his childhood friend Furuya. This was just too much of a coincidence. Morofushi Hiromitsu pressed his temples, looking at Komai Nagito in confusion. "How do you know the police officer who just called you?" Komai Nagito then talked a bit about the apartment explosion from a few years ago. Morofushi Hiromitsu also knew about that incident, as it almost ended up killing Hagiwara Kenji. Even after he went undercover and could no longer read external non-work-related messages, his old friends still often sent updates. It was through a rant-filled message from Masuda Jinpei aimed at Hagiwara Kenji that he learned about this incident. He never expected that the child mentioned in that message would turn out to be Komai Nagito. From the outcome, if it wasn't for Komai Nagito, he might not have made it and could have ended up taking his own life. In a way, Komai Nagito also saved his life. Morofushi Hiromitsu looked at Komai Nagito with even more tenderness and gratitude in his eyes. Although it was just a coincidence, this child did save him and his friend, essentially becoming their lucky star. For now, they definitely needed to stay hidden, act low-key, and probably wouldn't be able to come out for a while to avoid the organization finding any clues. But once there's an opportunity in the future, he must repay this child. Morofushi Hiromitsu thought to himself. After Komaeda Nagito finished talking about his relations with Hagiwara Kenji and Masuda Jinpei, he smiled and asked, Scotch-san, do you know Inspector Hagiwara and Inspector Masuda? Just call me Morofushi. Morofushi Hiromitsu didn't really like the title that represents his position in the organization. Yes, we were classmates. Ah, well, that's really quite the coincidence. Komaeda Nagito said, looking toward Morofushi Hiromitsu with a somewhat evaluative gaze. Though it's not exactly pleasant to think this way, his luck mostly seemed to apply to himself. Saving Hagiwara Kenji and this Morofushi police officer were just incidental occurrences. Still, the fact that they survived under the influence of his luck, at the very least, indicated they had some worth, didn't it? Moreover, the two of them actually knew each other. This made the coincidence seem a bit too convenient. Yet why did he end up knowing so many police officers? What exactly was his luck trying to tell him? Komaeda Nagito abandoned the thought. Anyway, once things actually happened, he'd probably figure out what the benefit was. With Amuro Toru's introduction earlier saying there was no need to worry too much, plus Hagiwara Kenji and Masuda Jinpei having known Komaeda Nagito for many years, if there were really any issues, they would have noticed long ago. When Morofushi Hiromitsu was giving instructions to Komaeda Nagito, his attitude was quite relaxed, as if he was full of trust in him, knowing exactly what he should and shouldn't say. As for Komaeda Nagito, who has signed a pile of confidentiality agreements since childhood, he handled this situation with ease, nodding as he listened, without raising any questions. And then, although it's likely that the organization will stop their investigation into you at the Tokyo level and abandon their suspicions, there's still a possibility they'll follow up here. If we arrange protection around you too tightly, it will instead make the organization suspicious. Moreover, considering the unique situation in Yokohama, if someone suspicious comes to investigate later, you will have to be extra careful on your own. Morofushi Hiromitsu gave instructions with great care, as if he were dealing with his own younger brother. This is an emergency contact. I set it on your number 0 speed dial, but honestly, if you need to use it, it might already be too late. I hope you'll never have to use it. Komaeda Nagito took back his phone, nodding to show he understood clearly. Be careful when making calls from home for the time being. After another round, your TV will break down, and someone will come to fix it. At that time, they'll help you clean up a bit of your little toys. By the time this explanation was given, they had reached Komaeda Nagito's home. Morofushi Hiromitsu had no intention of getting out of the car with him. He smiled and waved at Komaeda Nagito. We'll talk again when there's a chance in the future. We'll meet again, and at that time, I'll thank you properly. Hurry home, and stay safe. Similar to the suspension bridge effect, it led to Morofushi Hiromitsu subconsciously looking at Komaeda Nagito with a filter of affection, feeling that Komaeda Nagito was actually quite easy to communicate with. Occasionally, when Komaeda said things like, "Hope, please let me be your stepping stone, I don't matter, as long as I can help you guys, it's all good," and other such comments that made Amuro Toru get a headache, Morofushi just found them rather normal. When a kid tries so hard to help out, it's really adorable, Morofushi couldn't help but comment as he watched Komaeda Nagito head back home. The driver, who had listened to the entire conversation without wearing a filter. Inspector Morofushi, are you sure about that? Why do I feel like the way that kid talks and behaves is so weird? The driver silently thought to himself that, when reporting back, he must remind them to carefully conduct a psychological evaluation of Inspector Morofushi. It seemed that Inspector Morofushi had been undercover for too long, and the mental pressure was too much, almost like there was some psychological issue. It was just about signing a rental agreement, but somehow Komaeda Nagito ended up being conveniently driven back without really understanding why. Soon enough, he pushed the matter out of his mind. After all, no matter how he looked at it, this issue had nothing to do with him. He was just a passerby and felt there wasn't anything he could help with. Besides, Inspector Morofushi clearly had no intention of letting him assist anyway. Moreover, if he really were to be followed by that strange organization, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for him, so there was no need to be overly vigilant. To Komaeda Nagito, what was more important now was repaying Kudo Shinichi. After getting home, he put down his school bag and started researching how to find a suitable detective novel for Kudo Kohai. After browsing the forum for quite a while, Komaeda Nagito decided to make a post to ask for recommendations. May I ask if there are any relatively unknown but genuinely skilled detective novelists that haven't published their work yet? It seems like those with some talent usually already have a publishing history. Post content. Even in this original forum post area, if the writing is not bad, it's already been contacted for publication. I just want to know if there's anyone who writes really well but their work hasn't been published yet. A user with the ID Little Raccoon replied. There is. Chapter 36 End. Chapter 37, How to Get a Great Detective Novel. Komaeda Nagito's eyes lit up, and he immediately responded, asking the other party which author it was. However, this person named Little Raccoon didn't continue responding. Instead, others replied to Komaeda Nagito. OP, don't chase after it anymore. That person might actually be Little Raccoon-san himself. Someone tried to contact him before for publishing, but couldn't reach him, sent messages with no reply, sent invites and got ignored. I know he's very proud, but I never thought he would personally respond to something like this. He hasn't replied much since last year, why is he suddenly appearing now? Probably triggered by something in real life. As the replies continued, people started talking among themselves. It seemed they were all familiar with the Little Raccoon, which suggested that the Little Raccoon was somewhat famous on the forum. Komaeda Nagito asked humbly, "Excuse me, has Little Raccoon-san ever created any works before? I couldn't find anything in their works section." An enthusiastic netizen replied, "He deleted them all last year." Exactly, last year, as if something had triggered him. For a few months there was no activity at all, and everyone thought he was done for. But then after finally coming back, he deleted all his posts. A lot of people speculate if he was defeated by someone in real life. Because based on the details he revealed before, people guess that his real-life profession might be a detective. Such a pity, he was clearly a super prolific author, not publishing anything for a year. He must have accumulated a lot of works, but now they won't be posted here anymore. It might not necessarily be a loss in reality, it could simply be that he didn't think about posting it online, instead preparing for publication. Komaeda Nagito looked seriously at this information, organizing it internally before concluding that Kudo Shinichi definitely must have registered on this forum. In other words, the Little Raccoon, who had previously posted novels, Kudo-kun had probably seen it as well. To replies to it himself in this post, with the members of the forum teased him, and he didn't refute it either, which indicated that this, Little Raccoon's, work was indeed of high quality. Someone even commented that his level was not far off from that of Conan Doyle of England. If that's the case, Komaeda Nagito became even more invested. Thus, Komaeda Nagito quickly made a decision, sending a message to the Little Raccoon. The message content was very sincere and straightforward, expressing his wish to repay the person who made the request, but he seemed somewhat helpless regarding his current state. He then admitted that he hadn't read a single word of the other party's works, yet still calmly based his response on his friends' reactions and his own deductions, flattering the work with over 500 words of praise. In the end, he humbly asked if there was still any way to see Little Raccoon's works, and if they were published, whether there were any unpublished or recently written works that hadn't been posted online. He didn't even write this long for his English essays. 10 minutes later, Komaeda Nagito refreshed the page and found that his message had been read but not replied to. Well, this was pretty much within expectations. Talented people often have peculiar tempers or a bit of arrogance, which is normal. Fortunately, Komaeda Nagito wasn't alone. With a keyword search, he found many people posting threads asking how to contact Little Raccoon. Among these posters were scholars, fans, editors, and so on. Afterward, someone actually posted a guide. If you really want him to reply, it's very simple. Just give him a challenging detective puzzle. I have sent it, but he still didn't come back to me. The content is as follows, XXXX. Yours is too simple, I could guess halfway through it, it wouldn't enter his eyes at all. I also sent one, it was about a murder case in a chaotic neighborhood under my jurisdiction from 3 years ago. He replied in less than 10 minutes, and the answer was correct. He even conveniently guessed my place of residence. Komaeda Nagito reviewed all these successful and failed tutoring cases and summarized his experiences. Normally, detective mysteries more or less cannot move Little Raccoon. Whether it's fictional, based on a true story, or directly an unsolved strange case, it still needs to be on a highly sophisticated level to do so. However, this sophisticated level, possibly due to the overall decline in literary standards in this world, would be fairly common in the world that Komaeda Nagito remembers. Just delving a bit into those memories of another world makes Komaeda Nagito's head start to ache faintly again. He endured for a moment, letting the sudden burst of pain pass, then continued to ponder what to do next as if nothing had happened. Komaeda Nagito considered for a while, feeling that writing a novel was a bit laborious, especially when he tried to recall memories from another world, which only gave him a headache. With that effort, it would be better to just directly let Kudo-kun see it, rather than wasting this opportunity dealing with Little Raccoon-san. It was better to stick to the true-to-life route, wasn't that readily available? So he called his long uncontacted former neighbor, Ayatsuji Yukido. Originally thought that there would be no further contact with Ayatsuji Yukido, but unexpectedly received a phone call from Komaeda Nagito, who repeated in confusion, an interesting yet complex case suitable for a detective? Why do you need something like that? Komaeda Nagito said rather embarrassedly, I want to impress a detective novelist with a unique personality. Normal puzzles won't do, so I thought Ayatsuji-sensei might have some cases that meet the conditions, so I called to ask for help. I was planning to help sensei, but instead ended up coming to ask for help instead. I know I start from the beginning. Ayatsuji Yukido, who had finally managed a moment of silence, felt a familiar headache returning. Why did you suddenly want to persuade the other party? Do you really like detective novels? Komaeda Nagito then recounted how Kudo Shinichi had helped him find a place to stay and later made this request as repayment. As Ayatsuji Yukido listened, he realized that the root of the matter could be traced back to himself. If it hadn't been for him killing off those dozen or so criminals on the island, the special division wouldn't have come to monitor him, Komaeda Nagito wouldn't have had to move immediately, wouldn't have struggled to find a suitable place to stay, Kudo Shinichi wouldn't have needed to help him find one, and he wouldn't have owed Kudo Shinichi a favor. I understand. Ayatsuji Yukido agreed and headed downstairs. I'll organize the case files and send them to your inbox. Ayatsuji Yukido accepted this matter, but it wasn't just because he felt responsible for it, there was more. I also want to see Little Raccoon's work. Ayatsuji Yukido said regretfully, I have a rough idea of his identity, but it's a pity he deleted all his works. Ayatsuji-sensei was on that forum too. Komaeda Nagito wasn't too surprised. Did sensei ever contact Little Raccoon before? Ayatsuji Yukido said indifferently, I didn't get along with him. He was too naive, and I wasn't interested in contacting him. I just wanted to read his novel. Komaeda Nagito. Sensei, you're too straightforward. No matter how you put it, Komaeda Nagito was also helped by Ayatsuji Yukido. After receiving the parcel, he chose one of the case, rewrite the dry materials a little to make it look more like a puzzle, then translated it into English and sent it to Little Raccoon. After that, he went to have a meal. His ordered lunchbox had arrived. After finishing the lunchbox, Komaeda Nagito returned to his computer and found that Little Raccoon had responded this time. Not only did Little Raccoon solve the puzzle, but they also asked him in English, Are you Japanese? Yes. Komaeda Nagito immediately replied. After that, there was no further response from the other side. Komaeda Nagito thought that he couldn't leave it halfway, so he decided to redo with a different case again. He has to admit, Ayatsuji Yukito really knows how to pick interesting cases. This time, the little raccoon came back with the answer and then made a request: next time, just use Japanese directly. After that, there was nothing further. No matter how much Komaeda Nagito tried, there was no response. Recalling the forum comments about the little raccoon's poor social skills, Komaeda Nagito didn't give up and sent over the last case as well. This time, no translation was needed, which saved him quite a lot of trouble. In response, he received only the detective work sent back to him, nothing more. Komaeda Nagito pondered again. According to the strategy guide, continuing down this path would probably just lead to the same situation. Little Raccoon-san has no interest in anything outside of puzzles, ignoring even his true objective, and only responding to content that he himself finds interesting. This can't go on. Komaeda Nagito held a pen in his hand, tapping it against his notebook. The efficiency is too low, and the end isn't in sight. Who knows when he'll finally grind enough favorability to unlock the new novel. Komaeda Nagito threw down the pen and paper, leaned back in his chair, and closed his eyes, sinking into deep thought. Although Ayatsuji-sensei's case is quite interesting and has caught Little Raccoon-san's attention, at this level, wanting to take things further might be a bit difficult. Unless he presents something that Little Raccoon-san can't solve or makes a mistake solving. Or perhaps, gets stumped by a riddle. But Ayatsuji-sensei probably doesn't have such a scenario at hand, so he can only rely on his own memory. In other words, he still wants to write a book himself. In the end, it still comes down to this choice. But it could be considered as killing two birds with one stone. If things go smoothly, not only can he report the results of the mission to Kudo-kun, but he can also get closer to Little Raccoon-san. Maybe there will be some unexpected gains. Furthermore, he could fulfill Ayatsuji-sensei's wish by seeing Little Raccoon-san's new work. Actually, if it's the novel that even Ayatsuji-sensei wants to read, then he also wants to know what kind of novel it is. With that in mind, Komaeda Nagito went to grab some painkillers, just in case. Komaeda Nagito's current memory situation is a bit peculiar. It might be because of the excessive reason of memory reorganization, but he currently has both sets of memories very clear in his mind. The things he had forgotten, now, if he wants to recall them, he can. It almost feels as if they are happening right before his eyes, vivid and real. Especially in terms of recalling books, as long as he wishes, he can remember them almost word for word. However, if he tries to recall something from another world, he starts to get a headache. Moreover, the more he tries to recall things accurately, the more intense the headache becomes. This is because, the first time he talked about Natsume Soseki's book with Dazai Osamu, he didn't quote the original text but gave a general summary instead. Later, when he obtained the book in this world, he could directly cite the text without being influenced. The more he forgot, the more he tried to remember, and the more excruciating the headaches became. Finding the suitable novel from his lengthy memories clearly wasn't easy. Fortunately, since he had just called his former neighbor Ayatsuji Yukito, when thinking about this plan now, the first author that came to Komaeda Nagito's mind was Ayatsuji Yukito. Komaeda Nagito had also read quite a few works by Ayatsuji Yukito from another world, and the deepest impression wasn't from those avant-garde novels. Instead, it was from those cases that toyed with the reader's narrative expectations, earning the title of the Nightmare of Detective Masters, Dandanbashi, Ojita. Ayatsuji-sensei, thank you for the reminder. I know what I should do next. Let me borrow your name for a moment. Without hesitation, Komaeda Nagito brought his idea to reality. Based on his vague impressions, he wrote down the first case titled, Dandanbashi, Ojita, using his own words, then gradually worked through the pain that was becoming clearer. He recalled the details while perfecting the novel bit by bit. Although compared to the original work, there are definitely some differences, Komaeda Nagito really had a severe headache. Even though the short story didn't lack in word count, it was impossible to compare every single sentence. He read it once and felt that the content to be expressed was roughly accurate, with no bugs, so he figured it was fine. However, he still wasn't very reassured and decided to find someone to help check it. Therefore, Komaeda Nagito sent an email to Kudo Shinichi. Kudo-kun, I found a detective story that's quite interesting. Would you like to take a look? Kudo Shinichi replied quickly, sure, thank you, senpai. Komaeda Nagito immediately sent the newly written story as an attachment. On the other side, Kudo Shinichi was reading the newspaper, trying to find interesting news, not really expecting much while opening the email. He first glanced at the title and author. Dandanbashi, Ojita, author, Uchida Naoyuki. Who is Uchida Naoyuki? Never heard of him. Is he a Japanese mystery author? If it was well written, he would have been famous already. Not knowing that this was an alias for the famous mystery novelist Ayatsuji Yukito in another world, Kudo Shinichi's expectations for this story were even lower. Then, he began reading the story. Kudo Shinichi, despite the length, finished reading it fairly quickly. However, unlike his usual habit of deducing the culprit along the way or immediately getting the answer after reading, this time he was perplexed. Because no matter how he looked at it, this case just broke all of his reasoning. A child was pushed down a cliff, and there was a village near the cliff, with ABCD. Hold on. There were only 2 bridges linking the 2 sides of the valley, a suspension bridge and a single log bridge. After a skilled person crossed the suspension bridge, it was cut, leaving only the ropes, and these ropes couldn't bear the weight of an adult's body. At the same time, the witness claimed that during this period, they and their dog had been staring at the single log bridge, and no one crossed it. Who was it that pushed the child down? This novel even listed out the entire terrain map and the evidence of all the suspects not being at the scene at the very end, clear, with no intention of misleading. Kudo Shinichi stared at the novel, taking each person as a suspect and roll it over, but ultimately had to give up because the presented evidence contradicted itself. After a long while, he finally sent a reply to Komaeda Nagito. Only F lacks an alibi and, in terms of logic, apart from him, no one else could have committed the crime. However, if the author dares to list all the alibis, it means they are confident that the alibi can't determine the culprit. But other than F, I really can't think of another answer. Kudo Shinichi, uncharacteristically anxious, awaited the reply, as he had a faint feeling that this was somehow different from the detective novels he had read up to now. Perhaps his answer was wrong. Komaeda senpai replied quickly. In less than 10 seconds, there was a response. It's B. Kudo Shinichi was immediately astonished. He quickly typed, how could it be B? Didn't the witness say that no one crossed the suspension bridge? The rope couldn't even bear the weight of an adult. Komaeda senpai replied just as quickly, because B is a gibbon. Kudo Shinichi. Kudo Shinichi felt as if his stomach was clogged with a rag, incredibly uncomfortable. He wanted to reply that the author was toying with the readers and that this wasn't a detective novel at all, but just as he was about to press send, he suddenly realized something. He went back and looked through the story once more. Earlier, there were indeed subtle hints. The novel from start to finish never directly mentioned that B is human. Whether it's the way others address B or the pronouns used for B, there was never an explicit indication that B is human. Even now, looking back, many things that were thought to be strange behaviors due to the rather remote location were actually hints about B's species. If you didn't already know the answer, the clever descriptions packaged all these suspicious details as merely some strange customs, and seeing them in such a straightforward manner wouldn't make you notice anything unusual. However, this kind of feeling of being played really made Kudo Shinichi very unwilling. He went back and forth looking at it 7 or 8 times, attempting to find a flaw, but each time he looked, he could confirm that the clues were truly sufficient, and the evidence did not conflict with each other. This was indeed a standard detective novel. To be precise, it was overly focused on emphasizing the twist through narrative deception. Because of the uneven level of quality in the literary market, although there were already pioneers in the field of narrative deception in detective novels, those who could play it well were still few. Most of them tried to learn but couldn't, and what they wrote would end up being the kind that readers would curse at after reading. Similar to Dandanbashi, Ojita, although Kudo Shinichi initially wanted to criticize it, the more he studied it, the more he admired it. Upon careful examination, he realized that unlike those authors on the market who, unable to write a proper detective story, attempted to experiment with unreliable narrations, this author clearly had the ability to write a solid detective story. The seemingly absurd unreliable narration in this story was, in fact, meticulously crafted. One could even say that it seemed like the author was mocking those so-called unreliable narrations on the market, whose level of coherence couldn't even compare to that of a guilty monkey. Kudo Shinichi looked at the new message that Komaeda Nagito had sent, asking him if he found any flaws in the story. He thought about it, deleted the previous draft full of impulsive anger, and wrote a new reflection. He indicated that there were no flaws, and although the writing was somewhat immature, given the clever structure of the story, this minor defect didn't matter. He hoped the author would create more works in the future, and casually asked how Komaeda Nagito found this author. Komaeda Nagito replied that he came across the story by coincidence, and could no longer find the original source. Kudo Shinichi, although feeling that there was something off, understood that this response essentially meant there was no intention to answer. Therefore, he could only regretfully abandon this plan. Having received Kudo Shinichi's confirmation, Komaeda Nagito finally felt assured enough to hand over the story to Little Raccoon-san. Although Kudo-kun seemed satisfied, a short story was clearly not enough to express his gratitude. Writing another one was too exhausting for him, and he couldn't manage it. Better to see if Little Raccoon-san could give some new reactions this time. This time, Little Raccoon-san took clearly longer to reply, but it might just be a time zone difference. Komaeda Nagito wasn't really sure which country the other person was from, and although they used English, it wasn't necessarily their native language. As for him, between translating and recalling memories, it took so long that he really couldn't take it anymore. After washing up and finding that he still hadn't recovered, he just went straight to sleep. The next day was Saturday, and Komaeda Nagito finally got up after a lazy sleep. He went over to his desk, moved the mouse, woke up the computer, and then refreshed the message interface. He was shocked to discover that, despite seemingly having a social interaction disorder and appearing too aloof to care about others, the usually succinct Little Raccoon-san, who rarely spoke, might have responded at length this time because of his delayed reply. This case is impossible. Everyone else could find evidence proving they aren't the culprits. It's certainly not F, the trap is too obvious. Your previous puzzles were impressive, what's going on this time? Who's Uchida Naoyuki? We've never heard of this person. Either the question itself has an issue, or we more or less missed something. Our Japanese might be the shortcomings. Please tell us the answer. The messages weren't just a few. The language gradually shifted from English to Japanese. Although there was an issue with the riddle, judging from how he was still struggling with the answer, Little Raccoon-san likely knew that the riddle wasn't simply a bug. So Komaeda Nagito sent over the answer. Little Raccoon-san only sent back a response after a long time, although I figured it might be a narrational trick, but Japanese. The others seemed to agree that this novel was indeed a detective novel, but they didn't think it was because they wasn't capable enough. Instead, they believed they lost due to their lack of proficiency in Japanese. However, narrative tricks and language play detective novels do indeed require a high level of language proficiency, so losing in this regard isn't really something to be ashamed of. Moreover, this work, Dandanbashi, Ojita, was meant to play with people from the very beginning. This time, before Komaeda Nagito could try anything further, Little Raccoon-san proactively resumed the conversation with him. We have a person we must defeat, a Japanese person. We originally thought our Japanese was good enough, but it seems we're still far from it. If you have similar works like this in the future, can you continue sharing them with us? We can use our works in exchange. After a day of running around, even taking painkillers, he finally achieved his original goal. Komaeda Nagito let out a sigh of relief. Finally, he could report the results of his work, and it looked like he could return the favor to both Kudo-kun and Ayatsuji-sensei in one go. Sure enough, this was slightly more efficient compared to writing a full-length novel from another world. Can do, thank you very much. Komaeda Nagito hadn't seen the other party's works before, but judging from others' reactions and Ayatsuji-sensei's response, he guessed the other person was quite formidable. So he casually gave a few compliments, then got to the main point. By the way, who is this person you said you must defeat? Are they famous? Little Raccoon-san replied. In Japan, he's quite well known. His name is Edogawa Ranpo. Chapter 37 End. Chapter 38, I Am a Cat. Edogawa Ranpo. This name, Komaeda Nagito, really knows well. Not only because Edogawa Ranpo in another world is also a famous literary figure, but also because, in this world, Edogawa Ranpo is indeed a well-known detective. Especially in Yokohama, when Komaeda Nagito visits the police station, he frequently hears the police chatting about Edogawa Ranpo. It is said that the other party is currently working for a detective agency in cooperation with the government. In fact, Komaeda Nagito had long wanted to visit him, but after arriving in this world, things became too complicated. Recently, just finding a place to stay has been giving him a headache. He can't possibly show up at Ranpo-san's place to ask for help in finding housing, right? Komaeda Nagito hadn't actually planned anything. He came by to visit, but felt like he might be disturbing the other person's work, which truly was an unforgivable action. So, he kept delaying until now, and still hadn't been able to meet that detective Edogawa. However, if Little Raccoon-san also thought that Edogawa Ranpo was amazing, then they would have more in common. Komaeda Nagito immediately replied, I know him. I'm in Yokohama, and I often hear about the legendary detective Edogawa. Truly an incredible person. Little Raccoon. Komaeda Nagito, in a burst of enthusiasm, responded right away, only to realize afterwards that he should be trying to get closer to Little Raccoon-san, not picking at the other's scars. It is said that this person was defeated last year because they were too emotional, so they were provoked? Could it be Edogawa Ranpo? But that's not necessarily true, after all, it's just speculation. Thus, Komaeda Nagito replied again, are you planning to challenge Detective Edogawa? In other words, do you want to come to Japan? Then you need to practice your Japanese well. Right now, for some unknown reason, a lot of victims is especially skilled in cryptography, and they left very complicated final words. If your Japanese isn't good, you might not even be able to decipher those final words. Kudo Shinichi often brought up some cases during his chats with Komaeda Nagito. After hearing one where the victim used their own blood to write a symbol before dying, which later turned out to be the killer's name, Komaeda found himself amazed. After listening to many such stories, he developed a great respect for Tokyo's people's cultural quality. They could still think of such complicated things while suffering from blood loss and oxygen deprivation. How impressive. After Komaeda Nagito replies, Little Raccoon-san seemed withdrawn and started to fall behind in reading again. Komaeda Nagito also wasn't anxious. After all, he had already gotten to interact with Little Raccoon-san, initially unfamiliar but gradually becoming accustomed. Wanting to pry open the other's mouth today would certainly be much easier compared to yesterday. Remembering that he had go on the computer since getting out of bed, Komaeda Nagito turned around to do his proper work. The doctor had specifically instructed him to have a good breakfast. He went to the kitchen, rummaged around, found a box of nearly expired cookies, and brewed a cup of coffee, then returned to the computer. He discovered that Little Raccoon-san had already read it but hadn't replied, but now began to respond, and even sent him a compressed file. This is a few of the novels mentioned before. You can take it for your friend to read. Komaeda Nagito's eyes lit up. Just as he was about to reply with thanks, he was hit with another message. You said in Yokohama that you'd help us out. We want to know what Edogawa Ranpo has been working on recently. Overseas news tends to lag a bit. As compensation, we can send you a new short novel every month. Komaeda Nagito didn't reply immediately. Instead, he took a bite of the cookie, downloaded the compressed file and quickly decompressed it to have a look at this novel, planning to assess the author's level. A few minutes later, Komaeda Nagito finished reading the short story and breathed a sigh of relief. That's really great, as expected of Ayatsuji Yukido-sensei, who highly values writers. His level is indeed much stronger than those superficial works on the market. According to him, even compared to Kudo Yusaku, Little Raccoon-san is absolutely not inferior. So, the fact that he refuses to publish, remains low-key, and almost has no reputation in the outside world is very thought-provoking. It seems there's indeed some issue with his real-life identity. Although it's temporarily impossible to figure out the other party's identity, Komaeda Nagito's attitude towards Little Raccoon-san has clearly changed. At the very least, from a relatively superficial polite praise, it has become genuine feelings, and what's more, he readily agreed to the other party's request. No problem. Leave it to me. Little Raccoon-san is also a very capable person. I really look forward to seeing you and Detective Edogawa face off. It will definitely bloom with dazzling hope. Ah, if that day comes, please let me know. Just thinking about it makes me feel so excited. Detectives facing off directly, it will definitely. Little Raccoon-san seemed to be frightened by Komaeda Nagito's enthusiasm, unable to get back on track. After waiting for about another half an hour, Komaeda Nagito had already finished eating and taken a shower before the other shakily replies. Then I'll leave the intelligence gathering to you. Temporarily, there was no need to continue contacting Little Raccoon-san, so Komaeda Nagito distributed the compressed files separately to Kudo Shinichi and Ayatsuji Yukido, feeling that he had completed this task splendidly, absolutely perfectly. Ayatsuji Yukido quickly replied with a thank you email, which was very brief, containing just one sentence, "Thank you." However, Kudo Shinichi was different. He excitedly called directly. "Senpai. Is this a collection of Little Raccoon-san's works?" He deleted all of them before, and even the copies I saved on my computer mysteriously disappeared. "Where did you find these?" Komaeda Nagito leaned back on the chair, smiling as he said, "In exchange for conditions with Little Raccoon-san, Kudo-kun, didn't you said you wanted to see great detective novels that you've never read before? Probably after a while, you'll get it." No. There are a few volumes compressed in the file that I haven't seen yet." Kudo Shinichi said with emotion, "How did you manage it, senpai?" "I also tried to make a deal with Little Raccoon-san before, but he ignored me." Wait a second. Kudo Shinichi suddenly realized something, and his mouth twitched. "Senpai, you didn't happen to share yesterday's culprit, who was a monkey, to Little Raccoon-san, did you?" "Yes, is there a problem?" "No, of course, there's no problem." Recalling the suffering he went through yesterday, Kudo Shinichi inexplicably felt sympathy for Little Raccoon-san. "By the way, senpai, could you share that one from yesterday with me? He can't be the only one to suffer." "Sure." Having give proper credits to the original author, Komaeda Nagito had no pressure at all. "But as for the author's contact information, I really don't have it, you know." Kudo Shinichi squinted and complained, "Senpai, are you worried that after reading the novel, someone might want to send razor blades to the author?" Kudo Shinichi initially doubted whether the story Dandanbashi, Ojita was written by Komaeda senpai, but now he realized that the senpai could form a connection with even mysterious people like Little Raccoon-san, and given his consistent admiration for talented individuals, Kudo Shinichi found it quite normal for senpai to know a couple of modest yet gifted authors. Speaking of this. Komaeda senpai, have you ever considered writing a detective novel? Kudo Shinichi suddenly grew interested. "I'm a bit curious about what kind of case Komaeda senpai might come up with." Komaeda Nagito smiled wryly. "Spare me, you already have so many Little Raccoon-san novels to read, there's no need to waste time on a rookie work like this." 'Cause I'm curious, I feel like Komaeda-senpai. Kudo Shinichi thought back to the case he talked with Komaeda Nagito, recalling the other's reasoning style. Hesitantly, he said. Seems like you're really good at this sort of thing. If you don't write novels, senpai, maybe you should try being a detective. Instead of asking me, shouldn't Kudo-kun consider writing a novel yourself? Komaeda Nagito threw the question back at him. I'd be quite eager to read Kudo-kun's novel too. Kudo Shinichi. My dream is to become a detective like Holmes. Writing detective novels can help you understand the mindset of criminals more clearly, which is also beneficial for detective work. Your father probably agrees with this perspective as well. The 14-year-old Kudo Shinichi hesitated for a moment, but writing novels and detective work aren't the same thing. You know Edogawa Ranpo-san from Yokohama, right? He's amazing at solving mysteries, but if you ask him to write something, I'm sure he wouldn't be able to. Komaeda Nagito. Ah, what a pity, yet another literary legend who completely switched careers. However, your suggestion isn't bad. Let me consider it a bit. Kudo Shinichi still had confidence. Thinking about it, it's quite interesting, designing a case myself where readers can't guess the truth until the end. If I can write it, I'll definitely show it to senpai. Good luck. Komaeda Nagito encouraged. I'm really looking forward to it. Hopefully, I can see it before I start high school. It seems the literary world of this world can still be saved a bit. Komaeda Nagito hung up the phone, feeling that the world had become a little better again. He couldn't deny it, this world made Komaeda Nagito feel like something was off. Besides not having Hope's Peak Academy, there was also the issue of the struggling literary world. Komaeda Nagito currently spends his time watching a certain nation's president make speeches about patriotism. The English skills really connects with many others with poor comprehension skills. When he looked at his latest language exam that he took and saw the reading comprehension questions, he genuinely felt suffocated. Komaeda Nagito felt that if he continued watching these masterpieces of literature every day, he probably wouldn't be able to meet the standard for the language exam if he returned to his original world. Good or bad, after the president next door changed, even elementary school students could understand the speeches of the former bad president. That era has passed, but when looking at the literary world of today, the future seems a bit hopeless. The leaders are still leaders, but their numbers is especially lacking, and the fractures are severe. It's simply not something one or two people can salvage. Moreover, instead of saving the literary world, Komaeda Nagito would rather save his own proficiency in his foreign language first. Opening his notebook to organize some notes on the language, Komaeda Nagito sighed. The simplest way is to read more books, good books. But in Japan, probably only Natsume Soseki meets the requirements to a reasonable extent. Intentionally, Natsume Soseki in this world has a very low output, just a few volumes, and Komaeda Nagito almost has them all memorized by heart. Komaeda Nagito unconsciously wrote and doodled on the notebook, and when he regained his focus, he realized he had written something strange. He looked at the sentence and recalled, Dostoevsky. This wasn't the first time such a situation had occurred. Whenever he spaced out, he would easily write down bits from another world. Sometimes it was song lyrics, sometimes movie titles, sometimes sentences from books, and sometimes people's names. This kind of unconscious writing, rather than deliberately recalling the details of the situation, wouldn't actually trigger a headache for him, but translating literary works into the Japanese wasn't very helpful, especially now when he wanted to quote a famous saying. He couldn't just use the phrases he was familiar with, which was quite painful. Sigh. Who is Natsume-sensei's editor? Why can't they rush him to write a new book faster? Komaeda Nagito turned over the page, planning to reorganize the notes again. Just then, he heard the doorbell ring. Komaeda Nagito rarely had visitors. The last time someone rang his doorbell, it was someone from the special division coming to have him sign a confidentiality agreement, so he guessed it might be a salesperson this time. In theory, salespeople would ring the doorbell, wait for a while, and leave if no one responded. However, Just as Komaeda Nagito had walked to put away some of his belongings, the doorbell rang again. Could it really be something important this time? Komaeda Nagito finally stood up and walked to the door. Looking through the peephole, Komaeda Nagito was a little surprised as he opened the door. Dazai-kun? Standing at the door and ringing the bell was none other than Dazai Osamu, whom he had seen just the other day. If Komaeda-kun doesn't open the door again, I'll have no choice but to call you. After all, this time it needs to be Komaeda-kun who opens the door himself. Komaeda Nagito paused as he hastily gathered scattered books, clothes, and various items on the sofa. Why? Komaeda-kun should be clearer about that than me, right? Recently, you've been provoking someone. Dazai Osamu sat directly on the sofa where Komaeda Nagito had just tidied, smiling cheerfully as he spoke. They've tracked you all the way to Yokohama. Komaeda Nagito indeed had some guesses. Morofushi Hiromitsu did mention that recently there might be people from that organization coming to investigate him. But I didn't think it's going to be that fast. Komaeda Nagito seemed to be in thought. Dazai Osamu pouted, because you're really famous, Komaeda-kun. Who? Me? Yes, like that old man from Tei Corporation, for example. I heard that lately, when he scolds his subordinates, he always brings you up. Komaeda Nagito was speechless for a moment. Also, weren't you involved in the Reigo Island incident before? Although most of the traces was erased by the government, the detective who solved that case, Ayatsuji Yukido, is your neighbor. You moved immediately afterward, which anyone with a bit of sense would know was due to police interference. Dazai Osamu began by discussing Komaeda Nagito's recent involvements and eventually got to the point. Because of too many rumors, too many connections, that organization is roughly suspicious whether or not you're with the police. Komaeda Nagito also sat down. In other words, just now outside, there was someone from that organization investigating me? That's right. Dazai Osamu said with a smile. Now they can confirm that you have no relation to the police. Instead, your relationship with the port mafia is rather good, huh? Komaeda Nagito knew very well that after yesterday's events, Amuro Toru and Akai Shuichi would be excluded from the investigation team outside, so those who come to investigate him definitely wouldn't help cover up for him. Furthermore, it's likely that Morofushi Hiromitsu's identity as a Japanese police officer has already been exposed. If he also has connections with the police, then appearing at that building might not be just a coincidence on the surface. Instead, having ties to the port mafia would make the suspicion slightly smaller. Even towards a certain organization out there, dealing with the police is no big deal, but making a move against an organization entirely in the dark world would require much more caution. Because the government might still have many concerns, but for the underworld organizations, their morale is very low, so there is no guess what they would do. Dazai-kun, did you intentionally come to help me? Komaeda Nagito asked curiously. Not really. Dazai Osamu answered cheerfully, his tone shifting from flamboyant to somewhat calmer. I was just passing by and thought that Komaeda-kun's house should be around here, so I dropped by. Unexpectedly, I found someone investigating you, so I just conveniently handled it. Komaeda Nagito didn't mind and smiled. Still, thank you, Dazai-kun. But does the mafia also get weekends off? I'm a bit surprised. Mafia obviously doesn't have weekends off. Damn it. Dazai Osamu said naturally, I'm skipping. Komaeda Nagito. I originally thought becoming an executive would make things a bit easier, but yesterday I got a new subordinate, and after saying a few words, I was already exhausted and escaped quickly. Mentioning the subordinate he brought back last night, Dazai Osamu couldn't help but sigh deeply. Why can't there be more smart people around? If it wasn't too early now, and Oda Saku and Bungo weren't at the bar, he would want to go there to rant. The bar is out of the question, Dazai Osamu thought for half a day, but only Komaeda Nagito's place could still let him have some fun for a while. Boss Mori also wanted him to give Komaeda-kun a try, and since he was here, Mori-san wouldn't be in a hurry to rush him back. Who knows, he might even actively help him get rid of a few tasks. Yesterday morning after he returned, he reported to Boss Mori about the Natsume Soseki-related matter he had discussed with Komai de Nagito. Boss Mori clearly regarded Komai de-kun with a bit more importance. As expected, he found it odd that there were literary works of Natsume Soseki, which had never been published, coming out of Komai de-kun, didn't he? Dazai Osamu, though curious about Komai de Nagito, wasn't interested in Mori Ogai's orders, at least not now. He wasn't in the mood to deal with anything related to Natsume Soseki, and instead asked, Komai de-kun, what do you usually do on your days off? Komai de Nagito replied, probably just do homework, and after finishing the assignments, I'll do other things. Though sometimes the unfortunate event of my completed assignments getting ruined happens, I don't plan on changing the order. Homework, huh? Dazai Osamu suddenly got interested. I've never seen regular junior high homework before. No, to be exact, I've never even seen a junior high textbook. Komai de Nagito speculated that Dazai Osamu might be self-taught or have had some sort of private tutor. Anyway, from daily interactions, even though he didn't seem to enjoy reading, his cultural level wasn't low. Moreover, it was understandable if he didn't like those kinds of books, they were too ordinary. Seeing Dazai Osamu's sparkling, almost reverent eyes, Komai de Nagito hesitated for a moment, then offered, "Wanna come to my room and take a look? All my textbooks are there. The second room next door is." "Right, what do you want to drink? Coffee or water?" "I've only got instant coffee." "Coffee's fine." Dazai Osamu stood up, lightly stepping into Komai de Nagito's room. This is actually a bedroom, but beside the bed, there's a desk that serves as a study as well. His gaze swept over the leftover coffee cup, half a packet of cookies, and a computer in sleep mode, before finally resting on the desk. Dazai Osamu unceremoniously sat in the swivel chair at the desk, leisurely spun around once, and then picked up the Japanese language textbook on the table, flipping to the study exercises at the end. Why did the author describe the curtain as blue? Analyze the thoughts and emotions expressed by the author in this passage. Why does the author think that life is like bread? Dazai Osamu fell silent. Do ordinary junior high students have to face these kinds of stupid questions every day? It feels a bit pitiful. Instantly losing interest in the junior high textbook, Dazai Osamu was about to casually place the book back on the table, when he noticed something written on the reverse side of the page. He picked it up again to take a closer look. Life, full of sound and passion, yet inside empty of anything. It was also written in English. Why is there English written in a Japanese language textbook? Dazai Osamu became interested, flipping through a bit more, and found that in the other empty spaces of the textbook, there were occasionally a few sentences seemingly written absent-mindedly during class, unrelated to the lesson. Norwegian wood. I am a cat, Natsume Soseki. Does understanding everything mean forgiving everything? I don't know. There's something I call loathsome knowledge. It's when you see through a certain matter and it makes you feel so disgusted you could die, with not a trace of compromise in your emotions. Dazai Osamu, with an indifferent expression, stared at this final passage, his fingers lightly brushing the writing on the edge of the page. Then, upon hearing footsteps, he placed the textbook back in its original spot. After making the coffee, Komai de Nagito handed it to Dazai Osamu. As he took it, Dazai Osamu's thoughts still lingering on what he had just seen in those lines. He took a sip, and couldn't help but stick out his tongue from the bitterness, finally snapping back to reality. Dazai Osamu questioned Komai de Nagito. Komai de-kun, do you often space out during class? Huh? Komai de Nagito was stunned, then quickly responded, smiling awkwardly, sometimes I scribble a few things. Did you see it? Yeah, I saw it. There's something I wanted to ask. Dazai Osamu put down the coffee cup, looking at Komai de Nagito with curiosity. Why did you put Natsume Soseki's name next to I am a cat? Is this a new work by Natsume-sensei? Chapter 38 End. Chapter 39, Do Not Touch the Calico Cat. Natsume Soseki, I am a cat. Komaeda Nagito started reminiscing about when he wrote something like this. He had been too absent-minded during class too often, writing down random things too much, and if he didn't carefully recall it, it was really hard to remember in just a moment. Dazai Osamu chuckled as he watched Komaeda Nagito deep in thought. Can't remember? No, I remember. Komaeda Nagito leaned back against the desk, arms crossed. It's not a new work, just something casually written. Besides, when would Natsume-sensei come up with a new work, and what qualifications do I, an ordinary person, have to know about it? Ah, Dazai Osamu smiled broadly. Komaeda-kun, you're underestimating yourself too much. You know a lot more about Natsume-sensei than most people. Ha, it's just Dazai-kun giving me too much credit. Komaeda Nagito laughed along but quickly moved past this topic. Someone as ignorant as me can't understand Natsume-sensei's ideas so easily. I really need to keep studying. Well, let's leave it at that. Dazai Osamu didn't press Komaeda Nagito further on the suspicious points. After all, this was almost enough to report back to Boss Mori. What? Asking for more detailed information. We'll talk about it next time. Can't even get a vacation, and still have the nerve to make people work overtime? Dazai Osamu quickly put Mori Ogai out of his mind. He wasn't particularly interested in Natsume Soseki either. At most, he was a bit curious about the relationship between Mori Ogai and Natsume Soseki. Compared to that. Speaking of which, Komaeda-kun, Dazai Osamu pointed at his own pants. Can I borrow your bathroom for a moment? Komaeda Nagito's gaze fell downward, noticing that perhaps when Dazai Osamu's hand had trembled earlier, he had spilled some coffee onto his pants. I'm sorry. Komaeda Nagito decisively apologized. It was my mistake, I shouldn't have poured so full. I really am the lowest of trash, can't even make a decent cup of coffee. Please allow me to make up for my shortcomings. The bathroom is over here. I'll go find some suitable clothes for Dazai-kun. After bringing Dazai Osamu to the bathroom, Komaeda Nagito went to his room to search for clothes. Dazai Osamu is 17 years old this year, while Komaeda Nagito is 15. However, Komaeda Nagito has been growing quickly and would deliberately buy the largest size when purchasing clothes, so he could actually find something for Dazai Osamu to wear, including completely new underwear and such. There wasn't any time to dwell on washing it first. As long as it could be used, it was good enough. Komaeda Nagito found some suitable clothes and a towel, returned to the bathroom, placed the clothes outside, and heard the sound of water flowing inside. He knocked on the door. Dazai-kun? Do you need a towel? There was no response. Komaeda Nagito thought for a moment, then pushed the door open to take a look. No one. Well, it couldn't be said that there was no one. That not-quite-fitting coat had been thrown onto the bathroom floor. The bathtub was full, but the faucet was still gushing out water continuously. The water level had long surpassed the bathtub's capacity, overflowing and soaking the coat that had been carelessly thrown aside, leaving it half wet. Had he left long enough for the water to fill up like this? Komaeda Nagito quickly figured things out and stepped forward to glance at the bathtub. As expected, Dazai Osamu had soaked himself in the water, still wearing a white shirt and slacks. Without any particular reaction, Komaeda Nagito calmly hung the towel on a nearby pole, then sat by the bathtub, looking down. The youngest executive of Port Mafia lay at the bottom of the tub, his black hair and loose bandages floating in the water. Sensing movement above, he slowly opened his eyes. Through the rippling water and the flickering light, he indifferently gazed at the person sitting by the tub, leaning forward to look at him. Komaeda-kun, as expected, wouldn't stop him. Dazai Osamu carelessly thought. Because of wanting to witness it, Komaeda-kun wouldn't care even if he were to die in his house, wouldn't care if the Port Mafia would come looking for trouble or not. Komaeda Nagito watched for a few seconds from the side, then leaned slightly forward, reaching out to test the water's temperature. As a result, just as his center of gravity shifted, the hand supporting him slipped on the wet bathtub, and in the midst of this incident, he instantly fell down. Ugh! Suddenly falling into the water, Komaeda Nagito instinctively struggled a few times, his hands fumbling along the bathtub's edge before he managed to push himself up, letting his head emerge above the surface, coughing. Dazai Osamu, who was severely pressed down, with his stomach already suffering considerable damage, couldn't help but adjust his position. While supporting Komaeda Nagito, he reached one hand to the side of the bathtub, helping himself sit up. While coughing, Dazai Osamu still managed to smile and speak. Cough cough. Komaeda-kun really has no sense of caution. Komaeda Nagito brushed aside the hair blocking his view. After coughing out the water that had gone down the wrong pipe, he reluctantly replied. I'm sorry, I just wanted to get close and admire Dazai-kun reaching his goal for a moment. I didn't think I'd be so useless, ending up ruining Dazai-kun's plan instead. It's really too unfortunate. Clearly, Dazai-kun being willing to notice my bathtub for a suicide attempt was something particularly worth celebrating, but it ended up failing because of me. I truly am just useless, incapable of doing anything right. Dazai Osamu felt that, after getting used to it, hearing Komaeda Nagito say such things was quite amusing. This bathtub indeed did satisfy me, but since it failed, I don't plan to continue with it. Rather than that. Dazai Osamu took a deep breath. Komaeda-kun, could you get off of me? You just pressed on my stomach, and I feel like throwing up. Komaeda Nagito only then realized that his posture towards Dazai Osamu wasn't exactly friendly. However, there wasn't much space in the bathtub to stand up, so he had no choice but to carefully prop himself up and try to step out one leg at a time. Dazai Osamu also took on a defensive stance, supporting Komaeda Nagito as he stepped out to prevent this unlucky guy from falling over again and giving his own waist another serious hit. In that case, he'd really need a vacation. After both of them finally climbed out of the bathtub, standing on the wet floor, Komaeda Nagito suddenly sneezed. Achoo! Dazai Osamu, who was wringing out his clothes, heard the noise and looked up at Komaeda Nagito, asking thoughtfully, Did you catch a cold? Komaeda Nagito coughed a few times before speaking, his voice sounding a bit uncomfortable. Probably, I think it's about time I encountered some misfortune. Today has had too many good things happening. Achoo! Dazai Osamu shrugged, Sorry, I used cold water. At that time, the warm water was still being heated, so he directly used cold water. But to be reasonable, if Komaeda Nagito hadn't fallen in himself, whether he used cold water or warm water, it had nothing to do with Komaeda Nagito. Komaeda Nagito naturally also understood this reasoning. This isn't Dazai-kun's fault. No matter how he thought about it, it was his own problem. Fortunately, the symptoms were still relatively minor, so maybe it could be salvaged a bit. So Komaeda Nagito turned around and went to adjust the shower head to warm water. Dazai-kun, do you want warm water? Dazai Osamu, sitting beside the bathtub, said indifferently, You use it first. Not taking your clothes off. Taking off clothes might worsen my condition. Komaeda Nagito replied with experience, so we can only proceed like this for now. So, Komaeda Nagito, who has watched Dazai Osamu wearing his clothes in the bathtub, at this moment, he too had no choice but to put on clothes and take a warm shower, making others unable to resist commenting about this eccentricity. In any case, once the cold was dispelled, Komaeda Nagito walked from the bathroom to the laundry room, pulled the door open, took the clothes that had been prepared earlier for Dazai Osamu and put them on himself, then sneezed and went to find other clothes for Dazai Osamu. Dazai Osamu, after rolling around like that, still wearing wet and freezing clothes without changing for half a day, could still jump around, seemingly unaffected at all. Probably because I often jump into rivers, Dazai Osamu said, sitting in a chair, to Komaeda Nagito, who was sitting on the bed opposite, wrapped in a blanket, holding cold medicine mixed in water. Komaeda-kun, do you want to try? I still prefer to choose my own way of dying, Komaeda Nagito said, politely refusing. To choose for oneself, huh? Dazai Osamu repeated, then suddenly laughed. Normal people at this time would say something like, I don't want to die yet, but for Komai de Nagito, the focus was on choosing for oneself. Komai de-kun really has some miraculous luck. For Komai de-kun, choosing his own way to die might be the greatest act of freedom he can make in his life. There's no way he would let someone else decide for him. That's how it was. Summoned back to the Port Mafia headquarters, Dazai Osamu lazily reported the events to Mori Ogai. After that, Komai de-kun asked to rest, so I left. Mori Ogai massaged his forehead. Boss? If there's nothing else, I'll be going. No, you stay. Mori Ogai took a deep breath. Why did you go over to Komai de-kun's place to try and kill yourself? It was just on a whim, Dazai Osamu replied nonchalantly. I just thought Komai de-kun wouldn't stop me, so it felt appropriate. Even Mori Ogai, upon hearing these words, could only be left speechless. So, why on earth did Komai de-kun not stop you? Having only met Komai de Nagito once, and with most of the intel gathered from Mori Ogai's the documents he'd read, he felt that he truly did not know enough about Komai de Nagito. Just reading the materials, he really couldn't figure it out. Komai de-kun actually has the kind of personality that allows him to calmly watch someone commit suicide in his own bathroom. Mori Ogai pinched his brow. Only me. Dazai Osamu emphasized, if Boss Mori were to go and commit suicide in Komai de-kun's bathroom, you definitely wouldn't get such treatment, and might even get a sarcastic remark and be kicked out. Mori Ogai. Actually, your explanation here doesn't make things any better. In truth, Mori Ogai's main focus was originally on Dazai Osamu's report just now, Natsume Soseki, I am a cat. Before he could even contemplate deeply whether this Komai de Nagito, who seemed to be quite valued by Natsume-sensei, might actually be his kohai, he then heard Dazai Osamu jump to the part about the bathroom. Furthermore, he used his own need for rest as an excuse, wanting to laze around justifiably. Mori Ogai thought of another student of his teacher, Armed Detective Agency President Fukuzawa Yukichi, then thought about himself, and compared that to this Komai de Nagito, coming to a conclusion that he had even insulted himself. Natsume-sensei's choice of students seems to be getting stranger by the day. Unlike the upright Fukuzawa Yukichi, he has always been secretly gathering information about Natsume-sensei. He knows a little, like how sensei's ability seems to be related to cats, but the specifics are still unclear. But then this Komai de Nagito, right next to Natsume-sensei's name, wrote, I am a cat. Should this be considered careless or just overly casual? In any case, connecting this to what he knows about Natsume-sensei, Mori Ogai's first reaction was that this was the name of sensei's ability. If it is just about knowledge of the ability, it could also be that behind Komai de Nagito is actually hiding another powerful faction, wanting to collect information about Natsume-sensei. This possibility, it's just. Dazai Osamu brought back what was said to be written by Natsume Soseki, which overturned this hypothesis. The enemy might know Natsume-sensei's abilities, but they could not receive Natsume-sensei's teachings. Those writings did not seem like something written by an ordinary person. Between the lines, there was Natsume-sensei's aura. Rather than believing that someone with ulterior motives approached Dazai Osamu without being detected, it is better to believe that it was simply an ordinary person who had no access to detailed information but had contact with Natsume-sensei. Although lacking decisive evidence, in situations like this, unless Natsume-sensei is caught disciplining the other party on the spot, or Natsume-sensei admits it directly, there's fundamentally no way to confirm it. However, regardless, unless Natsume-sensei comes looking personally, Mori Ogai doesn't plan on changing his approach to interacting with Komai de Nagito, so after confirming a few details, he told the intentionally sneezing Dazai Osamu to go rest. By the way, Dazai-kun. Just as he reached the door, Mori Ogai spoke with a smiling face. If you choose your subordinates, then don't throw them to others for training. Even if it's troublesome, you must teach them yourself, got it? For today, that's all, go home and rest. Starting tomorrow, I hope you can take on the responsibility. If Akutagawa-kun destroys something again, it will be deducted from your salary. If your entire salary gets deducted, you'll have to work overtime to pay it off. Maybe Dazai-kun could experience sudden death this time, how about it? Just about to say he doesn't mind the deduction from his salary, Dazai-osamu, I understand. Even if he said that, whatever Akutagawa-kun did today wouldn't count against him, so naturally, he would wait until tomorrow to deal with it. Dazai-osamu, thinking back about the new subordinate he had just recruited, wanted to sigh. If only Komaeda-kun were his subordinate. His invitation then was sincere. Saying he felt a cold coming on and wanted to rest, Dazai-osamu had asked for a leave from Mori Ogai. After napping on the sofa in the office, he woke up to find that it was already evening. Dazai-osamu stretched, feeling 100 times more refreshed, without any symptoms of a cold. He thought about Oda-saku and Ango's recent work arrangements and decided to try his luck at the bar. Only Oda-saku is here. Arriving at the bar, Dazai-osamu went down the stairs, circled around Oda-saku, and was about to sit in his usual spot when he discovered a cat lounging there. He immediately widened his eyes, since when did we have a cat here? Before Dazai-osamu could reach out to touch it, the calico cat nimbly jumped onto the table, walked to a more distant place, and then lay down again. Not adopted. Oda Sakanosuke, who arrived a step earlier, replied, "Is it a stray cat? It's really clean, not afraid of people, and also." After hesitating for a moment, Oda Sakanosuke continued, "Also a bit chubby." The cat seemed to be somewhat unhappy, as the originally gently swaying tail came to a stop. Dazai-osamu watched this scene curiously. It seems like it can understand human speech. Mostly judged from the tone. Oda Sakanosuke said logically, "It probably just doesn't like being stared at by you. In the end, how is it friendly? I don't see it. Before you, everyone else touched it, and it didn't refuse." Oda Sakanosuke was also a bit puzzled. "Maybe you scared it." Dazai-osamu sat down angrily. "What the heck, so it just discriminates against me? It's just a calico, not even as cute as my Komaeda-kun." Unexpectedly, at this kind of moment, hearing this name made Oda Sakanosuke raise an eyebrow. "Komaeda-kun? Why Komaeda-kun?" "Oh right, I haven't told Oda-saka yet." Dazai-osamu enthusiastically took out his phone, waterproof. Mori Ogai refused to let Dazai-osamu have more excuses for losing contact, pulled up the album, selected a picture and enlarged it. "Look. Komaeda-kun." Oda Sakanosuke looked at the beautiful Siberian forest cat on the screen and praised, "It's indeed really cute." "What's really cute?" Sakaguchi Ango also appeared on time. When he was passing by, Dazai-osamu handed him the phone, and he sat down next to Dazai-osamu, putting down the bag in his hand before staring at the screen of the phone. The calico cat leaned towards Sakaguchi Ango's side, looking along as well. Compared to it, Komaeda-kun is even cuter. "What do you think? Isn't Komaeda-kun cute?" Dazai-osamu reached out to swipe the screen, and the calico cat quietly backed away a bit. "Look at this one, and this one. The eyes is especially beautiful on this one." Sakaguchi Ango hesitated, but unlike Oda Sakanosuke, who rarely pay attentions to news, he quickly connected to a recent rumor. "Wait. This cat, could it be Komaeda Nagito?" "Yes." Dazai-osamu admitted bluntly, "I told you, it's Komaeda-kun. I thought Dazai named a cat he was keeping Komaeda-kun." Oda Sakanosuke realized, so Komaeda-kun became a cat. Sakaguchi Ango's face was full of exasperation. Normal people wouldn't name a cat Komaeda-kun, right? Doesn't it feel strange? "I heard someone took a cat to headquarters to find Dazai-kun earlier, but then the cat was gone, and there were a friend of Dazai-sama appears instead, so I guess that cat might be Komaeda-kun." No surprise, being an intelligence member, you have such detailed news. Dazai-osamu clapped his hands. Koyone-san was scolding those who spread rumors to intimidate others back then, so it's normal that Oda-saku didn't know about it. Sakaguchi Ango calmly adjusted his glasses. "I heard a bit because Dazai-kun wanted to investigate the person who brought that cat over." "Speaking of the person who brought that cat," Dazai Osamu complained, how outrageous, bringing Komai-de-kuen's tailor back to Yokohama, just to see if I would lend a hand. Sakaguchi Ongo raised an eyebrow. Tailor? Ongo, you know, it's the one whose codename is based on liquor. Sakaguchi Ongo indeed knew. So Komai-de-kuen has been dragged into trouble again. He quickly starts to think things through, clearly sorting out the events in his mind. Very soon, he thought it through carefully. Regardless of how things turned out initially, according to what Dazai said, if Dazai went to handle it, the liquor factory on the other side would give up causing trouble for Komai-de-kuen. So you helped Komai-de-kuen? I just happened to pass by. Dazai Osamu replied with an unchanged expression. Originally, Komai-de-kuen wasn't that deeply involved either. Oda Sakunosuke remarked with emotion, Dazai-kuen is quite caring towards friends, huh? Dazai Osamu's face showed reluctant, no way, I've hardly even seen him a few times. I just, exchanged opinions. Is it because Komai-de-kuen doesn't acknowledge you as a friend, so you won't acknowledge him either? Sakaguchi Ongo asked curiously, could that rumor from the logistics department be true? Dazai Osamu, it's not for that reason, he's indeed not my friend. Also, Ongo, you really are a capable intelligence officer. Even the trivial gossip that was sealed by Koyone-san had managed to reach him, truly not to be underestimated. Thanks for the compliment. Although Sakaguchi Ongo found Dazai Osamu's childlike sulking somewhat rare, he knew not to push it too far, so he quickly changed the topic. So, how do you feel about the book exchange meeting? Komai-de-kuen reads a lot. Dazai Osamu affirmed, recalling Komai de Nagito's bookshelf, but what he likes the most is still Natsume Soseki. I saw he had a set of Natsume Soseki books on his shelf, and then bought another unopened set, saying it was just in case. Just in case? Oda Sakunosuke repeated, not quite understanding. Exactly, in case the original set gets damaged due to some accident, and he has no way to read it again. Dazai Osamu casually explained, Komai-de-kuen seems quite certain that the old set will one day be destroyed as a price for his luck, so he bought another set as backup. That's how I knew, despite so many books and so many authors on his shelf, the one he likes most is Natsume Soseki. The calico cat lying on the bar counter twitched its ears, slightly opened its eyes, and looked towards the three people talking. Sakaguchi Ongo furrowed his brows, finally realizing something. Komai-de-kuen's luck, does it always require giving up something important as the price? No, but according to him, the more important the thing he loses, the greater his luck becomes. Even Oda Sakunosuke responded to this, so in that case, doesn't that mean Komai-de-kuen basically has nothing important left? That's right. Dazai Osamu spoke with a kind of strange indifference. However, even ordinary people will lose important things in all sorts of ways, just not as intensely as Komai-de-kuen. Nothing in this world is eternal or unchanging. This topic was a bit heavy, and everyone suddenly fell into silence. After a few seconds, Sakaguchi Ongo finally spoke. Speaking of which, Oda Saku also likes Natsume-sensei's works, right? No wonder he has so much in common with Komai-de-kuen. When you two talk, do you often discuss Natsume-sensei? Actually, it's still okay. Oda Sakunosuke said, it's just that sometimes when Komai-de-kuen talks about a storyline, I don't really remember it. But then he quickly says he must have remembered it wrong, though I do feel the style is very similar to Natsume-sensei. Dazai Osamu commented, same here, sometimes I even wonder if he knows Natsume Soseki and has seen some of his random drafts. Natsume Calico Cat Soseki. Meow meow meow. Chapter 39 End. Chapter 40, Miko-sensei came to the door. Natsume Soseki, the legendary strongest ability user, regardless of how this reputation came to be, his ability, I am a cat, on the surface, seems to merely allow him to transform into a calico cat. Even this apparent ability, no one knows much about it. Mori Ogai, being one of his students, could barely piece together fragments of information through various means of intel gathering. Another student, Fukuzawa Yukichi, was too righteous, and apart from initially asking around everywhere to establish the armed detective agency, attempting to recruit members, he no longer investigated Natsume Soseki-sensei afterward, and thus had no related information at all. At this moment, Natsume Soseki, using his ability to transform into a calico cat, entered the bar to gather information. Listening to the conversation of 3 members of the Port Mafia, he fell into deep thought. Natsume Soseki entered this bar with his initial target being Dazai Osamu. As a government-affiliated figure, although Natsume Soseki has announced his retirement, it's impossible for him to let go completely. He still keeps an eye on relevant intel daily, especially regarding his tripartite framework. During the day it's the government, at dusk it's the armed detective agency, and at night it's the Port Mafia, with all 3 parties together protecting Yokohama. This has always been his focus. Compared to Fukuzawa Yukichi's upright style, Mori Ogai's path had already deviated a bit from his discipline at the time of the military police, causing Natsume Soseki even more concern. Especially since this disciple is in charge of the chaotic affairs of the Port Mafia. Although Natsume Soseki has some confidence in his ability to read people, human emotions and changes are unpredictable. Occasionally visiting to ensure the other party hasn't gone astray helps him sleep a little better at night. As for Mori Ogai's disciple, Dazai Osamu, Natsume Soseki pays even more attention to him. This is truly rare to encounter, the ability that can disable other ability users' abilities. It could be said to be something like a safety lock, but unfortunately, even without running into Mori Ogai, this child's personality is somewhat immoral, making the chance of being taken to the government side quite low. From this perspective, Natsume Soseki actually understands a bit of Mori Ogai's concerns. This child's immoral personality could indeed be like an unpredictable bomb. Mori Ogai has always attempted to place shackles on his head logically. But his methods are still too ineffective. No choice, when he took in this disciple, he was already of an age where his worldview had formed, and in this aspect, he couldn't do much. Since it's not a particularly big matter now, he wouldn't interfere in his disciple's affairs. However, it is still necessary to stay informed, that way, when something does come up, he would have enough intel to know how to handle it. Recently, Natsume Soseki learned through some channels that Dazai Osamu had been going out drinking with friends at night. So, he headed to the bar to do some undercover observation. But actually, unexpectedly, before he met with Dazai Osamu, he encounters the young assassin Oda Sakanosuke that he had met once before in the past. Could it be that Dazai Osamu's friend is actually Oda Sakanosuke? This really is quite unexpected. Relying on acting cute to stay at the bar, Natsume Soseki patiently waited for his target to appear. Although his mission required him to approach the target, Natsume Soseki didn't forget about Dazai Osamu's ability. If he accidentally got touched and turned back into human form, it would be too embarrassing, so he nimbly avoided him. After all, cats are capricious, refusing to be touched is perfectly normal. Natsume Soseki calmly thought this way. Dazai Osamu, feeling dissatisfied at being ignored, said, "Just a calico cat, not as adorable as Komaida-kun." When Natsume Soseki heard the name, Komaida, his instinct told him something was off. This name doesn't sound like an ordinary person would give to their cat, and even more strangely, he had come across this surname before in Ayatsuji Yukito's murder investigation file in the Special Division. That surname is not commonly seen. If Dazai Osamu is truly referring to the person he knows, why would he compare a human to a cat? After that, Natsume Soseki saw Dazai Osamu holding a phone showing off a picture of a cat, and even called that cat, Komaida-kun. While Natsume Soseki was a bit confused, Sakaguchi Ango, who had been sent by the Special Division to infiltrate the Port Mafia, explained Natsume Soseki's doubts. Natsume Soseki. Not good. I should be more careful from now on. Dazai Osamu has come into contact with an ability that can turn people into cats. If he somehow connects it to me, that would be troublesome. However, compared to the risk of his own identity being discovered, Natsume Soseki was now even more interested in Komai de Nagito. To be noticed by Dazai Osamu, and even brought up among friends at a gathering, was this a first? Natsume Soseki then listened to a bunch of, "Komai de-kun really likes Natsume-sensei, those sentences I haven't seen before," and other random remarks. Natsume Soseki. Up until this moment, Natsume Soseki had remained calm, wondering whether Komai de-kun had mixed things up or if imitating his writing style had caused some misunderstanding. Dazai Osamu continued discussing Komai de Nagito and Natsume Soseki. For example, "I am a cat." Natsume Soseki. Suddenly hearing the name of his well-protected ability mentioned in such a situation, Natsume almost bristled all over. Impossible. Even the government and those closest to him only know that he turns into a cat, but as for what his ability is called, he hasn't told anyone yet. What on earth is going on with this Komai de Nagito? Natsume Soseki was so frightened that he almost forgot his original purpose. He forced himself to endure the situation at the bar for a while longer, and after roughly confirming the dynamic among these three, he jumped off the bar counter and swiftly ran towards the exit. "Ah, the cat's running away," Oda Sakunosuke remarked casually. "That cat obviously just wants to freeload food and drink, otherwise it wouldn't be that chubby." "Oda Saku, no need to worry," Dazai Osamu said, unconcerned. Natsume Soseki nearly tripped when he heard these words. This old man is not fat. And as for freeloading, well, everyone was very enthusiastic. How could that be considered freeloading? This brat really doesn't know how to speak. How did Mori Ogai teach him? After confirming that the calico cat had run far away, Dazai Osamu asked thoughtfully, "By the way, Oda Saku also petted that cat just now, right? Was it male or female?" "Calicos are mostly female. A male one would be quite valuable," Sakaguchi Ango replied casually. "Why are you suddenly asking about that, Dazai?" "Just a random question out of curiosity," Dazai Osamu said. "Oda Saku?" Oda Sakunosuke raised the glass and remained silent for a few seconds. "I didn't pay attention." Saying that, no one would confirm the other party's gender just by glancing at the front, right? It felt a bit strange. "Well, if you encounter it again next time, Oda Saku, please pay a bit more attention," Dazai Osamu said with a cheerful laugh. "I feel that it's a male, want to bet on it?" Sakaguchi Ango, who was observing the entire time, didn't immediately think of Dazai Osamu suspecting the cat's identity. "I am a cat," was just the name of a new work that came to his mind first, rather than any ability name. He didn't even think of Natsume Soseki, so he added fuel to the fire. "Good, then I bet that's a female cat. Based on the probability, the chance of it being a female cat is quite high. The bet is that whoever loses next time will treat the other to a meal." Although betting against Dazai Osamu seems like seeking death in the port mafia, Sakaguchi Ango, who was rather familiar with Dazai Osamu as a friend, felt this was just a game. After all, the stakes weren't high, and there was no psychological pressure to bet. "How about Oda Saku?" Sakaguchi Ango asked. "Me?" Oda Sakunosuke thought for a moment. "I'm in charge of checking the gender, so I'll refrain from betting." Dazai Osamu let out a laugh. "Alright, then once Oda Saku confirms the answer, let me and Ango know who wins." "I think that cat will show up again." Dazai wants to get a cat. Sakaguchi Ango felt today's topic was a bit strange. As soon as he arrived, he was faced with Dazai Osamu's cat show-off. Now, Dazai started a random discussion about a cat's gender they had just encountered. Even though their previous chats were often quite pointless, they had never sunk to this level. "No," Dazai Osamu replied decisively. "I have no particular interest in cats. If I must say, I'm just a bit more interested in it than in dogs." The corner of Sakaguchi Ango's mouth twitched. "Really, not interested in cats, huh? Then why do you have so many photos of Komai de-kun cat on your phone? There are even videos. He hasn't even met Komai de-kun in person, and yet he already feels embarrassed. Dazai Osamu, seeing Sakaguchi Ango muttering complaints, explained, Komai-de-kun isn't actually a cat. If he's not actually a cat, then isn't it even worse that you put his picture as your phone wallpaper? Sakaguchi Ango adjusted his glasses and retorted. Dazai Osamu, with an air of justification, besides you guys, none would know. Moreover, I did it right in front of Komai-de-kun, and he didn't say anything. Sakaguchi Ango. At that time, he was just a cat. How could he have said anything? Meowing at you, would you actually understand it? Regarding Komai de Nagito, Sakaguchi Ango didn't really have a deep understanding of his personality. Using normal human logic, he thought perhaps the other party was in a confused cat state and, after turning back into a human, was too embarrassed to mention it again, which is why Dazai Osamu was so arrogant up until now. Alright, Ango, you're becoming quite long-winded. Dazai Osamu casually set a picture of Komai-de as a cat as his phone wallpaper. Don't you think Komai-de-kun's eyes are beautiful? Other Siberian cat does not have the same color of those eyes either. That ability user is already dead, and if I delete it, I won't be able to see this again. A childish pride gleamed in his eyes, and he waved his phone at Sakaguchi Ango. The one and only in the world. Sakaguchi Ango. Komai-de-kun, how pitiful. It seems that only Ango hasn't met Komai-de-kun yet. Oda Sakanusuke also seemed to be in thought, let's find an opportunity to introduce him to Ango. Komai-de-kun is only 15, he can't come to a bar. Sakaguchi Ango looked at Dazai Osamu, unable to describe his feelings. Do you have the right to say this, Dazai? I'm mafia, I don't need to care about the law, but Komai-de-kun is an ordinary citizen. Dazai Osamu spoke as he tried to put his phone into his pocket, but ended up failing. He was startled, realizing that today he wasn't wearing his usual clothes, so he changed the location and tried again. Oda Sakanusuke nodded calmly, I understand. You don't want Komai-de-kun coming here, so changing the location is fine, right? Not right. The point is that we can't introduce him to Ango. Sakaguchi Ango adjusted his glasses. Dazai, do you have a problem with me? Oda Sakanusuke pondered for a moment. Maybe it's because Ango might get along with Komai-de-kun. I also get along with Komai-de-kun, we're pen pals, and Ango might also become pen pals with Komai-de-kun. In that case, only Dazai wouldn't be part of it. Dazai really doesn't like writing random thoughts. Sakaguchi Ango looked at Dazai Osamu with a speechless expression. Is that the case, Dazai? Dazai Osamu gave Oda Sakanusuke a deep look. Oda Sakanusuke looked at Dazai Osamu without any particular emotion and continued, actually, I think Komai-de-kun just wouldn't admit it, but deep down, maybe he considers you a friend. Today, all your clothes are Komai-de-kun's, right? I also think if he truly thought of you as just a regular acquaintance, he'd be more inclined to have your subordinate bring you clothes, rather than lending his own. Sakaguchi Ango added, Yokohama is so small, even the time for a bath is enough to bring them over. Dazai Osamu, although he mentioned some things about Komai de Nagito earlier, didn't go into as much detail as he did like with Mori Ogai. For instance, he didn't mention anything about trying to commit suicide in someone's bathroom, only briefly mentioning things that Oda Sakanusuke seemed interested in, like matters related to Natsume Soseki. As for how they could figure it out, for the former assassin Oda Sakanusuke, with his keen observation skills, and for the intelligence officer Sakaguchi Ango, it was still quite clear. Dazai Osamu usually wore formal attire befitting a high-ranking member of the Port Mafia, but today he was in casual wear, with his sleeves even slightly short. Just now, Dazai Osamu, unfamiliar with the position of the pockets in this outfit, almost dropped his phone. His entire style had completely changed. You guys don't understand. Dazai Osamu reminisced about Komai de Nagito's strange impression meter, and felt a bit like complaining, but he held back. His usual playful expression became a bit more serious. Anyway, keep it to male contact, and don't get too close to him in real life for now. Sakaguchi Ongo didn't really have any intention of knowing Komaeda Nagito, and had just mentioned him in passing, since he was well informed after all. Is it because that kid is being watched by a few groups? Keeping a distance is also good. Especially since this even included their superior, Mori Ogai. Like Oda Sakanosuke, who didn't want to draw attention as a low-ranking member, it really wasn't advisable to have too much open contact with Komaeda-kun. Don't talk about this. Dazai Osamu restored his smile. Is there anything fun lately? The next day, when Komaeda Nagito left the house, he found a cute calico cat in the yard. He instinctively touched his own face. Morofushi Hiramitsu's medicine worked well, his wound had healed quite a bit, but seeing the cat still made him feel a bit PTSD. Meow, the calico cat seemed very affectionate, actively approaching, circling around Komaeda Nagito's feet. Komaeda Nagito felt a bit relieved, squatted down and patted the cat. I can't keep a cat, you should try another house, okay? The calico cat didn't seem to understand and continued meowing at him. Komaeda Nagito didn't waste time lingering around the calico cat, he quickly stood up. The calico cat obediently squatted down to the side. Komaeda Nagito also had no intention of chasing the cat away and directly headed out the door, walking in the direction of the public transit station. After watching him leave, the calico cat soon circled around the house. It discovered that the bathroom window was half open, likely for ventilation. The anti-theft bars outside the window could stop people, but they couldn't stop a cat. The calico cat stepped back a few paces, took a leap, hooked onto the railing, and tried to squeeze its body through the gap. This old man. Not fat. No need to lose weight. With such a belief, the calico cat successfully entered the bathroom. Although Natsume Soseki was once a government official, sometimes when he started doing things, he had a similar mindset to the Japanese police. Illegal intrusion could be a means to achieve the goal. Of course, ending things properly was also essential. Natsume Soseki flicked his fur, avoiding the water droplets from the bathroom, then went through the open door and directly entered the living room. The layout of this house was quite classic, so with just a glance, Natsume Soseki could determine where the bedroom was. No, of course, he wasn't planning to do anything bad, just that there was something he needed to confirm to be at ease. Since hearing Dazai Osamu say those words at the bar yesterday, Natsume Soseki immediately contacted his acquaintances in the government to gather information related to Komaeda Nagito, including mentions from the Special Division, Ayatsuji Yukido's investigative report on his nature, and also the results of Sakaguchi Ongo causing the Special Division to work overtime to compile for half a day, which concluded he was an ordinary person. All of it was brought over for further research. It must be said, Komaeda Nagito's information, for an ordinary person without abilities, is somewhat excessively complex. He looked at all those intricately constructed coincidences of the other's life, falling into deep thought. Natsume Soseki thought of the words he heard at a bar. This child, throughout his life, would always gain only to lose again, never able to hold on to the things he values, and the loss and gain are never truly balanced, and this isn't even an ability, there's fundamentally no way to control or prevent it. Especially since he lost his parents in elementary school, Natsume Soseki couldn't help but worry about what kind of personality such a person would develop. Natsume Soseki also did not fully trust the materials presented in the documents, even though the majority of people evaluated Komaeda Nagito as calm and open-minded. He couldn't simply accept it like that and felt it necessary to see it with his own eyes before coming to a definitive conclusion. Moreover, the materials did not show any particular connection between Komaeda Nagito and himself. There wasn't even a letter sent to the publisher. Natsume Soseki deeply doubted how Komaeda Nagito knew the name of his ability, and he found it hard to trust any of the related materials. If he could hide so much from the intelligence divisions, then what kind of terrifying force was manipulating him from behind? Thinking of this, Natsume Soseki immediately felt a sense of crisis, and he even couldn't trust others. Looking at those documents, with so many people, no one had noticed any problems, so could investigating again yield any new conclusions? In the end, he decided to handle it himself. Dazai Osamu said that Komaeda Nagito wrote those things in his textbooks, so he should look in the study or places like the nightstand. Natsume Soseki entered the room and immediately noticed that the bedroom and study had been merged into one, which was very convenient for his investigation. However, he didn't act recklessly right away. Instead, he pretended to be a real curious cat, looking around to see if there were any cameras. There was no other choice. Living in Yokohama, everyone had a particularly heightened sense of caution. It wasn't uncommon to have surveillance cameras, wiretapping devices, and similar gadgets installed at home. Even if Komaeda Nagito himself didn't set them up, the international crime organization that was investigating him might sneak in and install something. If Natsume Soseki were exposed because of this kind of situation, he'd have no face left to go mooch off. Ahem, receive feeding anymore. After checking, Natsume Soseki confirmed it was safe and transformed back into his human form. It wasn't just because his paws made turning the pages inconvenient. He certainly couldn't take each book off the shelf with his mouth and leave bite marks. That would be hard to explain. Natsume Soseki picked up a Japanese language textbook that was on the table, casually flipped through it, and, as expected, found the passages Dazai Osamu had mentioned. The only truly serious philosophical question is suicide. We already know that life is a tragedy, and what's even sadder is that you aren't even the protagonist of this tragedy, fate is. That sentence is very strange. He has never seen it before, but almost every sentence expresses deep viewpoints that are rarely expressed by contemporary writers. He believes these sentences could not have been written by Komaeda Nagito, a mere teenager, especially since the slightly longer sentences also show, from the detailed word choices, that they must have come from different hands. Where did Komaeda Nagito read all this from? Natsume Soseki pondered, turning the pages, as more fragments of text came into his view. Natsume Kinnosuke, diabetes. Seeing this, Natsume Soseki took a sharp breath. Natsume Kinnosuke, that is his real name. Because of wanting to do extremely dangerous work, and also adhering to the principle of mysterious actions, he took on the pen name of Natsume Soseki from the very beginning as his operation period. Even the number of government officials who know his real name could be counted on one hand, and all intel about him had been erased. This child, Komaeda Nagito, just how did he know? Komaeda Nagito, after buying the items and returning, placed them in the living room, having a faint premonition. It was as if something was about to happen, but he couldn't find a single clue, having no prediction at all about this. However, to Komaeda Nagito, this didn't matter at all. Danger to him was also an opportunity. He never worried about it. When heading towards the bedroom, Komaeda Nagito suddenly realized the reason he felt something was wrong. When he left, the bedroom door was closed, but now it was slightly ajar. Komaeda Nagito hesitated for a moment. Come in, Komaeda-kun. The person inside seemed to have no intention of hiding their presence and spoke out loud directly. We need to talk. Chapter 40 end.